Thank you. I will try to do my best. Let me try to share my screen first, maybe. Let me choose the correct desktop. Should be one. You should be able to see the slide right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, and then we can go.
You're right. You have the slide.
All right, cool. Oof. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, time zones, right? This is unit testing done right. And I know the title might sound a bit provocative. That was my assumption. I admit that. But in fact, the main message of that talk that I'm hoping to share with you at the end is that there is no right or wrong. Past 12 years, I've been employed as a developer, as a team leader, as an architect, as a trainer and consultant. And this allowed me to be able to be exposed, to many different problems, to many different domains, business domains, and to be able to work with many teams at many different organizations. And my observation, it's subjective, of course, hence it's my observation, is that we as an industry have a tendency to speak like artists do sometimes. For instance, arguments like, this solution is better because it feels like it's better. I can feel it from the inside, or it follows certain dogma, or it's against a dogma, so it's better, like this. And I think that, well, in my humble opinion, in software testing, it leads to fractions. One fraction would be people who actually test everything, and people also who claim that they have specific project, specific product, and their testing does not work. That leads to either love or hate towards testing. Whereas I think we should be somewhere in the middle. By the way, love and hate is the second title for this talk, and I wonder if you know why. And the image in the background you can see right now at this slide is a hint, by the way. And also, please don't get me wrong. I love art and I have nothing but warm feelings about artists, really, I do. But let's try to talk like engineers, okay? Let's try to talk over pros and cons, of any given solution, any dogma. And I think first and foremost, let's try to contextualize every solution or dogma before we have our judgment. In fact, this talk is built just from a couple of beliefs that I want to discuss with you. Okay, I think the level is basic, maybe intermediate, and there will be a lot of live coding, by the way. So hopefully the demo gods are with us today. And since we talk about live coding, I will be simplifying things, okay, while coding today, due to the fact that we have 50 minutes. So due to the fact that we have a certain amount of time. Also, I will be sometimes exaggerating with my decisions while coding on purpose, but please wait with throwing tomatoes at me until the end of a given section, or maybe fragment of code or presentation, okay? All right, I think we're ready to start. So sleeves up and let's get to work. I would like to share a fragment of code right now. And I know it's simplified, it's not that long as you can see right now, but in fact, deep there, it hides everything that I've seen in many different domains, many different businesses, in many classes which are larger than this. I tried to hide everything, every problem that I could have seen in different projects where we had more than 200 lines of code. Let's go through that service, leave service very quickly. It has one private method. As you can imagine by the name, it allows people to go to vacation or no. So I can request paid days off. I can pass a number of days I want to have. I pass employee ID. There is some sort of validation at the very beginning. We load data related to that employee to an array of objects. Why not? This is an old-fashioned legacy system. Then we get the employee status, days they have used so far. We compare if together with the request, it's not more than 26, which is a certain law in a certain country, by the way. And then, of course, like in every project, there are some exceptions from the rules, from the business rules. If a person is a super top elite performer in our organization, we want to give them more than 26 days, up to 45. But the request from 26 to 45 should go through manual verification. And this is super important. Escalation manager should be notified about this. And I'm not making this up. I have recently met a person who works at an organization and they have an escalation department, which means they have escalation managers. And I thought it would be It'll be funny to just use it in the talk. That's a real story. Escalation department, escalation managers. They have to be notified. That's super important. Otherwise, if it's more than 45, sorry, even though you are a top elite performer, the request is denied. We send you a nice email, which is also important. It's important for us to send that email out saying, maybe let's try next time or something like that, okay? If you want to use more than 20, sorry, less than 26, by definition, the request should be approved. We, of course, change the state of our database because we have to memorize that you used X days more. We save it back to the database. And of course, respecting the boundary of our transactions, we send a message to a message bus sending request approved. Maybe there's an external system who might be interested in that. Again, there's an exception. If you are a slacker, which means you play PlayStation 4 or 5 all day long, all the requests are denied. We send emails as well saying, let's try next time. Basically, we wait for you to come and sue us because we don't give you paid days off. This is a very simple class, as you can see. And my experience is that people have problems with testing such classes. So let's try to do that. Even though I might know what this class is responsible for, I can list down, for instance, every possible scenario that I can think of, like requests of performers will be manually processed after 26 days, performers, they cannot get more than 45, slackers, they do not get any leave, and so on and so forth. I can list it down, right? I can write it down. I can start implementation. Of course, in real system, the system that probably most of you work on daily basis with, there will be more than 5 or 6 scenarios, close to 60, taking into account also the complexity of the class. But I can do that, but it would take more time. So let's try to implement a couple of those tests. I will do like 3 and 4, and then use my my repo to check out the version I prepared 2 hours before the talk. Okay. So what I need to do, I need to teach my database to return an employee who is a performer and have used 20 days so far. So I'm using Mockito to stab it. Okay, so far so good. When someone, this person with ID number 1, they want more days off, like let's say 20 more, which means together it's 40, the same ID, right? Then I'm expecting certain things to happen. The first thing I expect is that the request will be manually verified, right? Which means I can assert equals result manual should be equals to result. Cool. But also remember that there are some more things to check which are important. For instance, I would like to check if the escalation manager was notified, because we had a bug in production and someone comes to a test and corrects that because, well, next time I want to catch it during testing. All right. So I will make sure that the escalation manager was notified with a correct ID, which is 1, I guess, right? Cool. I would like also to make sure that the things that I don't expect, they actually don't happen. So I can verify no interactions with a message bus, neither with, if my memory serves me well, email sender. All right, let's try to run this test and see if it's green. By the way, if it's red, I have no backup plan, by the way. It's green, it's good. Let's do one more, maybe. Let's do a slacker. Slackers, they do not get any leave, which means the database have the slacker inside, and they have used 1 day so far. Even though they want just 1 more, the request should be denied. I'm not expecting the escalation manager to be notified, but I want an email to be sent out. That's very important, right? Because we want to make sure that people get notification. All right. The text was something like next time. Maybe it would have been better to check if a certain text is inside of the email instead of checking the entire message. But this is just a presentation. Let's assume we expect certain text to be present in the email. All right, let's try to run this test and see if it's green. If it's green, we'll jump to the next test. That will be the last one. Happy path. So the regular employees, and they get 26 days. All right, I have a regular employee, 1 day used so far. I want just 1 more. the request should be approved, right? I'm not expecting any emails to be sent. Same applies to escalation manager, but I want to make sure that the message is sent out, right? Send event, next time, no, request approved. Let me double check if that's the correct message we expect here. Yes, but also we want to make sure that the state was saved back to the database, right? Because we are incrementing days used so far. I want to make sure that it goes in the correct state back to the database. All right, I can do that, right? Maybe that's not the best option to do, but I can actually make sure if database was called with a specific argument. Send, save, new array of objects. Don't get me wrong, this is our API, so I have to use that. Regular and 2, right? 1 + 1 means 2. Let me run those tests. And I'm not saying that's the best way of writing tests. I'm just saying we could write it that way. And now let's see what are the consequences, okay? What are the consequences if we were about to do what we always are about to do, which means changing requirements, new features, things like that. If our code is stable, we can live with those tests. But what happens if actually we need to change some requirements, even though the change should be very simple business-wise, taking into account our current design, it might be hard. Let's see. But first, let me check out all of the tests. All tests. All right. As you can see, we have all of them right now. We just gained like 3 minutes. Let me run them and see if they are green. Okay, they are green. So let's now talk about those new requirements. Let's say we are deploying our software to a different country, and 26 and 45 doesn't work in that country, or maybe organization. So I want it to be configurable. Very simple, right? I'm injecting a new dependency to my class, and I will take 26 right now from the configuration. Cool. Not max days for performance, but just max days. Same applies to 45. Get max days for performance. Of course, if I run those tests right now, I will get non-pointer exception because there is no configuration. So I will mock it, right? If I run them, probably Mockito will return default values. So I need to teach Mockito that configuration has 45 and 26. Remember, I have 60 scenarios, not 5, but 60. So typically, what some developers would do would be something like this. I won't do it in every scenario, every single scenario. I can do it once. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying I could do that. And let's see what are the consequences again. Configuration, max days, then return 40, 26, right? Get max days for performers, 45. It should be good to go, but if I run tests right now, I have 2 problems. First and foremost, the test shouldn't be green, as my memory serves me well. Yes, that's the first problem. We'll talk about it very soon. The second problem is that if I have 60 scenarios like this, and I want to read one, I need to go back and forth to see what actually this scenario means. Some assumptions are made here, other assumptions are made in the scenario itself, so it's really hard to read. The second thing, which actually Mockito says to me, is that, as you can see, only tests related to performance are green. Only tests related to performance. Every other test is red. And Mockito says, you know what? You have unnecessary stubbings detected. Those stubbings you are using here are not used for this test, that test, and that test as well, which means probably you have no idea what you are doing. If you want your test to be clean and maintainable, that should require 0 unnecessary code. That's actually a nice feature. I can disable that, but I can also take this advice and apply it, which means I need to move this stubbing related to performance only to tests related to performance, and now my test should be green. But remember, I have many dependencies, many scenarios that requires more work than 2 minutes, like we just did. And I didn't change anything when it comes to business logic, right? I just changed the data source, which shouldn't be so hard in my code base, right? Why I'm seeing 60 tests red, in fact, when the only change I did is this.
Jakub, I'm sorry, there are some issues with the sound. Can we try something?
All right, let me double check. I will change my mic right now. How about now? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Now it's better.
All right, sorry for that. I just broke my microphone 2 minutes before we started the talk. So I'm using a replacement, and now I'm using replacement for replacement. Hopefully that's fine. If the sound is bad, please let me know. Thanks. All right, so the problem was adding new dependency. It's problematic in this kind of testing scenarios, right? Adding a new dependency breaks business logic. All right, that's the first problem. Let me get rid of the configuration and let's jump to the second problem, which will happen on production very soon. I'm super sure about this. All right, here, let me remove the configuration as well. Nice. And let's check if the tests are still green. Second problem would be a very subtle change from business requirements. For instance, when it comes to the text of the message we want to send to Slackers. Next year, instead of next time, of course, as all of you know, some tests will be read, probably more than one in a regular project, not the one that I prepared for the presentation. And probably all of you know why. Because while I was writing those tests, I didn't pay attention, right? There is a nice feature of tests, or maybe a nice practice, a good practice, which says tests should have one reason to fail. This test have multiple reasons to fail. Not only business logic related to denial, approval, or manual verification, but also the text of the email and what I do with escalation manager and so on and so forth. So what I can do, according to this good practice, and I should probably do that with every single test, but I will do that only with that. I should probably split those tests, separate those assumptions. For instance, Slackers, they get a nice email after denial, which means I'm not interested in the denial itself because I will have a separate test for that. But I would like to make sure this is happening. Probably another test for this and that, if that's super important. And that test, in turns, should only test the denial. And now, only this test will fail, of course, because, well, I'm changing the email. So the test related to the email should fail. That's nice. So if I do this, then it's easier to follow the errors that I see while changing requirements. But let's stop for a while, because I haven't changed a bit when it comes, again, to the business logic. The previous design with test would have led to many different tests failing, even though I haven't changed a bit the logic behind what the result is. So the first problem was about adding a simple dependency. Second problem was about changing requirements which are not crucial to the domain logic. I would rather say these are external consequences, but both of those situations were breaking our test. And third and the last one would be like this. Imagine we have a DB admin and they say, you know what, this query we have here by find by employee ID was super slow on production. It took 16 seconds, but I did some optimization and now it leads to 2 seconds, which is a significant gain, isn't it, right? 16 comparing to 2. So what you should do, dear developer, is now this. You know, the status is now under 3, not under 0, because, well, that was my trick that I did in SQL. Never mind, just take the status from 3. And of course, what happens to my tests? All of them will fail. And imagine this important, significant gain from 2 to 16 is crucial to be deployed very soon. I have 60 tests which are not passing, and I have a manager standing behind my desk asking, where are you going to deploy that change? Our clients are waiting. They want this screen, this feature to work 2 seconds, not 16. But, well, you know what? I know that this is under 3 right now, or under 1. So I don't have time to correct all the tests. I'm not saying that's the best attitude, but it might happen. I can see that someone will do this at some point, right? Ignore the test and deploy. And after this, you know, we'll fix that as soon as we deploy that super important change. The thing is, and the reality is that sometimes, or even most frequently, I'm not going to say always, but pretty much close to always, no one actually cares about those tests later on. And we have a legacy system with a couple of tests. Some of them are ignored, some of them cannot be trusted. And this is where some people would say, you know what, we have a specific project, testing doesn't work. So they feel hate towards testing. So let's stop for a while and summarize what we have done with the code. I could ask, what does the leave service do? And that might be a very stupid question, right? Because it decides whether you can go on vacation or not. That's super obvious. That's the responsibility of that class. Well, I would ask then, is that the only responsibility? Because as far as I can remember, it also validates input data. Let's check here. Validation, right? Here is validation. All right, what else? I think it also loads data that's needed for the decision to be done, right? From the SQL statement or whatever. It also reacts to that decision. So not only it does the decision, makes the decision, but also reacts to it. For instance, escalates, send an email, maybe send an event, maybe save something back to the database. So I'm having all of these responsibilities in one single class. And also, they are not one after another, but I'm starting with validation, then a little bit of the decision making. If I don't have a decision, I will load more data. Then I will try to decide. Maybe if I have a decision, I will react. If not, I will go to the decision making process again. So it's mixed, right? Even though I can separate tests just for the assert equals manual and other tests for the consequences for the reactions, like we did with Slackers, I can do that with test separation. If someone comes here and drops a bomb where I load the data for the decision, all of the tests are red, even though I haven't changed anything when it comes to the business logic behind the decisions and reactions. The bomb might be dropped in here, might be dropped there. In that specific scenario, those tests will be red. So I'm not going to try to describe what single responsible principle is. The more people we ask, the more definitions we get. But I will try to answer what it is by saying what it's not. I think this is not SRP. Without saying what SRP is, I know this is not SRP. Too many things at one place. So in fact, when we feel hate towards testing, maybe our focus should not go to the tooling behind the testing, to the unit testing, integration testing per se, but maybe to our design under the test. So now let's try to actually fix that design with a very simple trick, because I have maybe 60 lines of code, maybe 60 methods, maybe 6,000 lines of code, and to be able to divide that into smaller cohesive units, that requires work. I would need to understand the domain very closely. I would like to follow DDD principles and so on and so forth. That would be cool. But what I can do, which won't be perfect, but better than this, is just trying to list down the responsibilities like this. I have a decision-making process here. I have data loading right here. Basically, this is loading. And here, the crucial point is that fragment of code. Decision plus consequences. And I cannot stress that enough. Decision plus consequences in one place. Let's try to move that to separate classes. So this would be easy. Let's forget about it. We don't have time for this. That's super trivial. Maybe it can even stay. But the thing is that here we have many different things in one place. Decisions and reactions. So what I can do, I can actually move the decision-making process to a separate class. I have no idea what's the name of that class yet. I know only one thing. It decides. Give me decision. I will call it something. Let's make it package local for the sake of this presentation. This array of objects won't be needed, hopefully. Same applies to days. I can pass the days in the methods parameter. All right. So far, so good. I have a new class. Of course, it doesn't compile, as you can see. Let me fix that in a while. For the sake of this presentation, I will keep that in a one big gigantic file. But of course, probably according to your preferences, that should be in a separate class. I have a something class. Invoke might not be the best option. Request 8 days off. That's better, right? 8 days off. I will pass days here as well. Right? which means it doesn't compile. I will change that to accept days. Well, let me make it more visible. I have, by the way, this is data loading right now, right? I want to load something from somewhere, and then I have a decision here. This is a decision, and I will have consequences here. Consequences. What are the consequences? If the result is manual, I will do something. Otherwise, if the result is what? The second option would be denial, and the third option, the last one, would be approval. All right, so I will have consequences in here. So I'm just blindly copy pasting the thing that we had here. Escalation manager when it comes to manual verification, copy pasted. Oops, a mistake. When it comes to the denial, I would like to send an email. When it comes to approval, well, we have many things to do. First and foremost, I need to, well, now increment the internal state of my decision-making machine, but that's something's responsibility, not leave service class. I don't care about this. And also I need to save something back to database and send a message, of course, respecting the transactional boundaries. All right, like this, approved. Cool. Let me fix this. I have taste, we have a result here class. I think we can get rid of this by doing return, an early return. Cool. So far, so good, hopefully. But there's one thing that it's worth mentioning right now. This is responsibility of data loading, right? I want to get something from the database. In fact, I want this. I don't care about whether deep there I'm loading an array of objects. I don't care about this. I want to move that to a lower level, of abstraction. Maybe I should have called it a repo or data access object, but I don't want it here. I want it there, which means I need to change the API of that class, migrate something, sorry, change variable something, not make find by employee ID, return something. Which means also I need to save back something here, which requires me, unfortunately, to change the public API during this refactoring. I know, not the best practice, but we have some tests for that. Change variable, migrate something, nope, this first one. Cool, refactor. Let me double check right now. That's leave database, which is stopped for the sake of this presentation, which means I'm happy to do this. That would be where the array of objects goes, and heavy SQL or whatever we use, maybe an ORM. In fact, you can see we have 6 problems, probably related to tests. That will be our last change in here, because, well, we taught our database to return an array of objects. Now it's not true anymore. I know during refactoring, we shouldn't be changing production code and test code at the same time, but I feel pretty confident with that. So let's do this. Maybe let's do it all at once. New something, ID and status, and what else? And what is that? What else? That's it. I think if it compiles, then we are good to go. We have some problem here. Let me double check. Oops, new something. Now it's better. We have some problem here as well, the same problem. And last problem we had in the last test. But if we take a closer look at this, I was expecting a new array of object to be saved. Now, what I expect is just the same thing that was loaded to be saved upon approval, which means I can do this. And now, fingers crossed for running the test. And if they are green, we can sum it up. What was the trick about? In fact, it didn't require me to know every single specific bit of the business. All right. So what we have done in here is we had a class which was complex when it comes to the cyclomatic complexity. Many if statements. At the end of the day, we are changing state. Days so far equals days so far plus new days. So according to complexity, it was high. Also, number of shared dependencies of leave service class was high. Of course, we had 5, but you know, those classes, those services, they have more. Shared dependency would be the one which is not private to my component. I will be something that's probably also injected to many different places. So both those descriptions were high. Number of shared dependencies and complexity. What we have done, we have just moved the complexity to something and left a huge number of dependencies in leaf service. That was quick. That was easier to do. We are not saving the world. I know it could have been refactored in a better way, but that was quick. And this allows me to do a very specific thing. During testing, I can now notice a very specific thing. Take a look at this test that we separated at the very beginning, slackers. I'm teaching my database to return something, then I'm calling through the service request space days off, so it goes to the database, and then I check just the denial. Probably you all know that now with this design, I can test that without having to mock the data, to stop the database. In fact, I don't need the service at all. I just need days to be passed, and that should be green as well, hopefully. So in other words, I will be having a suite of tests which doesn't require me to mock anything or to go through the leaf service, or to go through some shared dependencies. I will just check my decision-making machine, the slacker, and that's it. And I will have second test which check the leaf service, but it doesn't care about the decision-making machine. I just want to make sure that the decision is denied or approved. And according to the decision, I want to make some reactions. So two different set of tests, of course, maybe in two different files, that should have been done in two different files, right? Which also leads me to a conclusion that, of course, there will be classes in your system which neither have complexity nor huge number of shared dependencies like DTOs. And of course, I will have different testing strategies. And if I just think about this number of shared dependencies and complexity and don't put them in one place, my testing will be easier. And if I change configuration, if I change 26 to configuration, if I change the text of the email, the somethings class test will be actually green all the time because I'm not changing the business logic behind it. If I change it, contrary, leaf service test will be stable and somethings test will be red, which is something I expect to see. So in fact, I don't need to feel hate towards testing. I'm not saying I should be feeling love right now, but well, according to the right class of problem was solved with the right class of tooling, and that's it. But this actually leads to a second thing, because if we now take a look at the tests we created, some of them will be using mocking and stubbing extensively, and some of them don't have stubs at all. And I have seen that many times, fractions of people who would say, we need to mock everything or stub everything that can be stubbed or mocked in a specific test. Another fraction of people would say, and developers would say, you know what? We don't want to mock or stub anything. Like if we can just create that from scratch, that's perfect, and let's do that. And then we have some sort of a fight club. People try to fight with each other. But in fact, the problem is that we try to choose the same tool everywhere, like mocks or not mocks is just a tooling, right? Mocking, stubbing is just a tool. Makes sense in some places, doesn't make sense in other places. So it's not like every single piece of our code base should be solved in the same way, right? But that creates some tension between those two fractions, and let's talk about it, because I have seen that many different times. Many smart people talk about different, for instance, testing pyramids, like the regular one, which looks like this. But sometimes we have a system which has huge complexity on the presentation layer and very small complexity on the business layer. And then the pyramid is inverse. We have also CRUD-based systems. And then we don't have pyramid at all. Maybe something like like a rectangle. So different problems, different tooling. Same applies to mocking or not mocking. If we think about why we stub or mock, I think it's just because there are different dependencies that we use in our software. Some of the dependencies will be shared. And this comes from a very great book called Unit Testing Principles, Practices, and Patterns. I strongly recommend reading that. It's a tremendous book. Shared dependency would be something which is not private to my component will be probably injected to a set of different places. Then we have private dependencies, and in turns we can have mutable ones, but the ones that change state, and not immutable ones, like value objects, for instance. And we have different testing schools. Actually, it comes from test-driven development. The classical school would say we mock only things which are shared dependencies, also called Chicago style or Detroit style. And there is also Mock's style, so-called London style. And they say, you know what? We mock almost everything. We also mock private mutable dependencies. There is no point in mocking or stubbing value objects, immutable private dependencies. We can create them. I like this drawing from a different perspective. Things which are mocked in classical school and things which are not mocked in London school. And then it becomes clear that the matter of disagreement is whether we mock private mutable dependencies. Let's try something out. Let's try something out so that we have our own judgment. If I was about to refactor our something, you know what? Let's do that. I have my sampling class, and let's say this branch is very complex. So I'm moving this to a too many days solver or something like that. And I have this branch, which is also complex, and I'm moving that to a separate class, regular days solver. Right? So I have now, imagine those are dependencies which are somehow injected or created via constructor, not here created via constructor in a method's body. Okay? Imagine they are injected. So now I have this kind of a design. And classical school would say, well, if you test on the something level, we have two dependencies, right? But you need to create them from scratch, right? Because these are private dependencies. I'm not going to mock nor stop them because these are private dependencies. And then there are arguments against this kind of testing. The first argument is, well, if you have many tests in the somethings test suite, and someone makes a mistake here, and those tests need to go through too many days request solver, I have 10,000 tests which are red just because I failed with line of code with too many days request solver. So I need to correct something, and I see many different tests failing, which might be a little bit stressful. My private subjective answer to this is I want to see that. I want to see how many different business functionalities actually depends on single line of code in the dependency deep down there. So I want to see them red, actually. But that's my opinion. Second argument would be this. If I have many more dependencies, maybe, you know, too many days request solver and regular request solvers, they have 2 and 3 dependencies. So I have layers of dependencies. The graph, the tree is very complex, and I need to somehow create that graph from scratch at the very beginning of my test. And then my tests, they look like 10,000 lines of code in the given section and 1 line of code per when and then section. Probably we have all seen tests like this in a legacy system. So, well, this testing school doesn't work. That's the argument. Again, in my opinion, I want to see that. I want to see that pain because maybe I will direct that pain to the fact that something is wrong with my design, right? I don't want to recreate that many dependencies in order for me to be able to test simple thing. To sum it up, in classical school, this is a unit. So I need to create a unit for the unit testing. In London school, I would mock it. This is private. Let's imagine private mutable dependency. I want to mock it. And if I have tests on the something level and someone makes a mistake at too many days request solver, the tests are still green, right? Because I have 3 different units. So the schools, they differ also with the assumption what an unit is, right? A unit in classical school was something like a set of classes. London school would probably, at least my understanding, is we have a unit per class. And again, which one is better? I don't know. I think it depends on the team, on the organization and the project and the code base and the design we chose. For instance,
if we have the something which finally might be called employee, I think it's high time we give this something's name. Let's call it employee. For instance, my preference is that the leave service will be tested with mocks, maybe one integration test without mocking, and then some set of unit tests with mocks. And on the business layer, when I have complexity, when I have a huge number of decisions, I would prefer testing without mocks. So different schools depending on the level I'm testing with, because mistakes have different consequences on different layers. Probably a mistake is more severe in the employee class than in the leave service class, or maybe contrary. That's why I said I think we should judge it case by case. And then we have love, or we might have love instead of hate. Another thing, test-driven development leads to a great design. I have heard that many times. I have said that many times. I strongly believe that still, but I have got to know many people who would say no, it doesn't work at all. It's nonsense. And I think people are just talking about two different things when they say TDD works or TDD doesn't work. So let's try to do a small experiment. I'll just check out correct tag for this. Check out TDD. All right. And let's imagine those tests were written, you know what? Let's start with this, without tests. I have some scenarios for my TDD. Bot product is not available. Very simple design. Sorry, very simple requirements. Cannot change price of a bot product. Can change price of an available product. And now let's check out the tests. And let's imagine I was doing TDD, red-green refactor, no production code until I had a failing test for that, and so on and so forth. And I have finished with those tests. Product can be bought, and then it's not available. I cannot change price of a bought product. I can change the price of a product which is available, which means I also have a class with some internal state and some method. And then, like in all projects, like in our products, I have a new requirement. The requirement says this: I can create an unavailable but visible in catalog product. For people who have worked at e-commerce, you all know that we don't sell things that are in our inventory, but things that could be in our inventory, things that we can actually get somehow, which means we want to sell them or at least present them to our customers, but they are not available still in our inventory. Okay, let me try to start with TDD. And I know I will be exaggerating a bit, all right? Product P. You know what? Those products, they have a specific ID and it starts with catalog prefix. Why? Because that's my choice for understanding that these are specific products which are not in the database, sorry, in the inventory yet, but I want to present them. I want to actually fit this new requirement to the current design of my system using TDD. And then what? I expect that, let me hide this, that product is not available, hopefully. All right, this doesn't compile. Let me create this kind of constructor. This is some sort of number. I will use field for that, like this, which is not present. So let me create that field, create field. Let me initialize this in the previous constructor with some random ID, okay? The test should be red, hopefully. Why? Because, well, new products should be available by definition, but this one won't be available. So let's see, it fails. All right, it failed, which means now I'm in the implementation phase. It's available if the status is available, and also if that's not the special product, right? So if the number, let's say, doesn't contain this specific prefix, I could implement that many different ways, right? But I have chosen this one. Let's try to see if the test is green right now. And of course, after this test, which actually passed, I can do some refactoring. I can move that to a separate method. It's special, or it's catalog. Maybe it was that was a better name, right? Of course, I will have more scenarios from TDD, like I cannot change price of this special product because, well, I don't have price yet. That would be insane. So I could do this at some point without test. I mean, just for the sake of this presentation, but normally I would start with a test, right? At some point, someone will get to know that, you know what, we have this getter of price, And those tests, sorry, those things which are special catalog products, they don't have price, but people are calling this price. Frontend is somehow serializing this and presenting. So I will have a contract with those people on frontend that if that special product, I will return -1, you know, a trick. I can follow test, red, green, refactor, and so on and so forth, but I will make weird decisions. I know that weird decisions inside of my class. So then people would say, you know what, that's not great design. That's, in fact, it's a crap. This -1, this if statement with special, with this prefix, it's not a great design. And then we have hate. But let's try to think about what actually does it mean. TDD leads to a great design. Let's examine the sentence word by word. TDD, we all know, test-driven development. Leads to, well, it's easy. Great, well, subjective, but we can actually have some judgment. Design. What does it mean, design? What is design? What do you mean by that? Do you mean encapsulation and friendly API? Yes, I got it through TDD, even though inside my class is useless. But I have encapsulation and some sort of a friendly API. I have testability. I have started with tests. The tests are not seeing implementation details of my product class. I have it. I have good naming. Why? Because it comes from testing scenarios. It's easy to refactor. So TDD leads to a great design. It looks shiny, right? On the outside, it looks nice. I was following certain practices. I have some sort of encapsulation. So it's shiny and colorful, but in fact, it doesn't represent the reality. So I'm building something which looks nice at some point, until some point, but doesn't serve the operational needs of my business. In fact, it doesn't reflect the reality at all, even though it has nice API. So what design is? So other people would say design is something like this. Noticing the fact that I was developing two different things in one class. In fact, what I have should done is I should have noticed that we have something like product description, which is independent from the physical instance of the product that I can see in inventory, and maybe I have some unique product, like a product description would be a book description with abstract price, with some sort of sorry, not abstract thing, because it doesn't relate to a physical copy of the book. It's just a description for the sake of a catalog. And then I have identical product in inventory, and I have some sort of unique products, like this book was signed by the author. So it's the same description, but different instance. In fact, this is so-called business archetypes. Business archetypes are things which are not common to a specific industry, like e-commerce, or bookstore, because they can be used in many different industries, different domains. Actually, this archetype product description, if we think about templates of any agreement, it's the same, can be modeled the same. Books, agreements, cars, whatever. That's why it's called business archetypes. And there are many more. You can, for instance, read about them in the book, which is mentioned in the right corner, enterprise patterns and NDA. But TDD didn't lead me to this insight, right? I didn't know that. I mean, thanks to the test, I had the encapsulation and possibility to refactor, but it didn't stop me and caught my hand saying, you know what, the business archetype is hiding there. No, it didn't happen. So it doesn't lead to a great design if I think about design according to what design is with the second definition. But in fact, I think it doesn't lead to a bad design either. Good news or bad news? Good news, right? The real news. We as developers, we lead to a bad or great design. That's up to us what we do. It's not called test-driven design. It's called test-driven development. It's an implementation technique which gives me safety, which helps you to set up the target and go to this target step by step by making those tests green, right? So it's not like it will give me all of the things that I need to know about the design. I don't need to know about the domain at all. From the fact of me doing TDD, I won't get to know what's down there in the domain. I need to do some sort of my own thinking, I would say. I know it might be controversial, but I have written many lines of code, which is, I would say, not nice, even though I was following TDD. In the same manner, I think I have write many different lines of code that some people would say, hey, it's a nice fragment of code, even though I was writing test after. So the message would be, if TDD doesn't work, and because I strongly believe it works really, but if it doesn't work, maybe we should be learning something more about our domain. Maybe we should be learning more about requirements instead of jumping straightly into our solutions like, well, I know TDD, that job done. I don't think so. Maybe we should learn some more archetypes. Maybe we should be exposed to many different domains, many different problems, see similarities and differences between them. And then if we know TDD and domain knowledge, I think we'll have great design, regardless of how people describe the word design, because we'll have good design or great design in any given definition. In the definition of, hey, this is our model, like 3 or 4 classes that represent different things, and also encapsulation, friendly API, possibility to refactor, and so on and so forth. And then we can have a common understanding of, well, TDD leads to a specific design, but we are responsible for this design as developers and architects and modelers. Other thing I would like to mention, it's a situation like this. This is, by the way, a manager who actually stands behind a developer's desk and shouts at him saying, you need to write more tests. I know, rare situation, but it happens. And it happened to me like, I think 3 years ago. I was speaking on a conference in Texas, and after this talk, a person came to me, and that person was responsible for a huge development unit in Asia, huge. And that person asked me what they shall do in order to convince their developer to write tests, because my talk was about refactoring, about testing, and so on. And I replied, what have you done so far in order to give some arguments to convince them? And he said, well, I tried to say that the tests are important and they will be gratified if they write more tests. So people actually then have some, I think so, tensions between each other, between management and business unit. We have some sort of misunderstanding. And we cannot just convince people like this. At least that's my experience. And it was also the same conclusion was done by 2 psychologists in 90s or 80s. I don't really remember. By the way, the experiment took place in Nomen, Texas, and the experiment was about saving energy. And they said that now we are measuring how many different households how much energy they consume. And the experiment took 2 months, and they said that the person or the household who would gain most energy would be recognized in a local paper. So they tried to build this belief of saving energy is good, thanks to the pillar of recognition, audience. And after one month, actually people were using less energy. They were saving energy, which is good. And those psychologists, they said, you know what, there will be no recognition at all. We won't be notifying anyone. There won't be no one mentioned in the local paper. And they did that on purpose. Why? Because our common sense would say that people would stop consuming less energy and would go back to the previous habits. But in fact, thanks to the fact that they had time to build internal pillars, internal understanding, not external like audience, but internal, like I have more money, I have better self-esteem. This pillar of external recognition is gone. Even though it's gone and the initial promise is gone, people were consuming even less energy. And this is how does it relate to tests, by the way? And I have an answer for this, hopefully. If I try to build my assumption of writing tests only for the sake of being gratified, only for the sake of being recognized, without taking a time to see that, well, it's more fun, I have better code, I have less bugs, which means I have, I think so, better self-esteem, because I develop code which doesn't contain that many bugs, and it's easier for me to be faster. if I don't have this, I just have an audience, probably at some point people will get bored. And this is what happened with that person. That's why we had this talk. That's why we had this conversation. They were trying to measure unit testing and testing thanks to the code coverage, line coverage. So how many lines of code are covered? And I always have a very simple basic exercise for code coverage, which is measured in lines. Let's imagine we have a test like this. Very simple test for the sake of this presentation. Just, I have a new product which is available. I want to check if it's available. And how do I check it? By comparing status. But you know what? I had a bad day and I implemented this, this answer to is available like this. Return false. Sorry, true. Otherwise, return false. Otherwise return false. And now, of course, it works, hopefully. You know what, we can check that. I will run this test, but with a coverage calculation. And we'll see how many lines of code, classes, and so on and so forth are covered. As you can see, I have 100% of classes, which is 1, by the way, 2, 4 out of 4 methods, and 8 out of 9 lines. I can even take a look which line was not hit. This one, right? So I'm checking 88% of code, 100% of method, but in fact, I'm just checking 1 out of 2 business possibilities, right? And if I have a better day, I can simplify this if statement to this, rerun my test suite, and now if my math skills are serving me well today, I should be seeing 100 line coverage. Yes, even though I'm still covering 50% of business cases. So I'm not saying this is a bad metric. I'm just saying this is the start of the conversation. If I have 100, doesn't give me huge confidence. If I have 0, probably it gives me some starting point for the conversation. Branch coverage might have been better. Like how many branches are we covering with our test suite? Some people talk about delta coverage. It cannot be measured. At least I personally don't know a tool who measures that, but that would be situation like this. I'm looking at a test suite and I'm asking myself what specific value, unique value, this test gives me when it's red, when it's supposed to be red, and when it's green, when it's supposed to be green. If the value is nothing, there is no delta. If the value is not unique, that means some other test gives me the same information. Probably I have repetition. So that's something harder to measure with tooling, but at least something we can think about. Mutation testing might be also another metric, another tool that helps us to not only rely on this code coverage when it comes to lines. And thanks to this story, actually, we can convince people that sometimes testing makes sense, unless it doesn't. And there are situations when it doesn't. And I want to talk about those right now, because contrary to what I have described with a developer, with a manager who shouts at the developer, hey, write more test code, probably you and also myself, we are more experienced, or we have seen many situations which are contrary to the one I described. We as developers, we want to write code, test code, and we want business people to understand that. And if they don't understand, then we have some fraction, we have 2 fractions, and we have a not so safe environment to work at. I would put it that way politely. But then if we have some empathy to people who are not that much related to technology, and also maybe are not that much experienced when it comes to the process of software development, if we go inside of their heads, they think that time of development equals time of coding. I know it's naive, but actually some people not experienced enough, they think in that way. Time of development equals time of coding. And if they also think that time of coding equals coding production code plus coding test, thanks for the rule of transitiveness, left now equals right, which means I have time of development equals to production code and test code. Well, so if I have the second factor, time of development takes more, right? But then, if people think that way, we can actually ask questions. Do you remember last time when we were developing this huge feature? And the answer might be yes. Remember what we are doing after actually I deployed everything to production? Yes. What was that? We are integrating for 6 weeks. Remember another 12 weeks? Yes, we were bug fixing. So actually, it's not just prod and test. We have 2 more factors. And guess what, dear business? Integration and bug fixing, those 2 last factors are closely related to the second factor. The more I have test code, the less I spend on integration and bug fixing, hopefully, which means I can also draw it and talk about this with my business experts. Of course, it will be quicker at the very beginning. Of course, it will be quicker if I don't have tests. I have more code to integrate with, so probably I will also introduce less bugs. So if my product's life cycle is expected to be 4 weeks and then it's going to be trashed, I will write no tests. As an engineer, I think that's the same decision. I won't invest in modularization as well. That would be waste of time. But if we are developing the strategic advantage over next 10, 5, 6 years, whatever, probably it's sane to actually invest at the very beginning, because the return of investment will be crucial at the very end. I like to draw this this line like this, with this flattened part of it at some point, and that's actually a joke, but I call it Sebastian point, because that's where my friend Sebastian comes, and he writes code which delivers huge progress, at least from the business perspective, but he hacks it in a way that actually the progress is negative later on. Some people do it, and sometimes we have to do it. That's why I have no bad feelings about what Sebastian did, and I say hello to him if he is watching that. All right, but this is a regular shape of that line, of those lines. So if we talk like this, that actually creates better understanding between us being the technical people, and the business unit, or however we call our domain experts. All right. Last thing I want to cover, because I'm running out of time, I need 2 minutes, is this design. And let's say we want to refactor it, but not a very simple refactor, right? Like like moving methods between classes, or maybe creating a new class, moving some responsibilities, but rather huge refactoring, which means I just realized that all of the things we do with live service, with some things, and those 2 solvers can be done in 3 lines of code, which means I don't need live service, something, too many days request solver, and regular request solver. If they have tests, they are useless because I want to get rid of that. I can do that in 3 lines of code. So it's rather like architectural refactoring, okay? And how to do that in a safe manner? Well, there's probably some client of this. Let's agree it's a live controller. It might have been that we have many more clients than one live controller. But from the perspective of live controller, this is a unit. I know it's not a unit when it comes to understanding what unit is, but from the perspective of live controller, that's a component which does certain things. And I don't care from the perspective of live controller how many classes are down there. I want to get rid of them, but I want still live controller to be able to call live service do something, but in 3 lines of code. Which means the only way I can do that in this design, it's probably integration testing, right? I cannot do that with unit tests on the live service and something's level, because, well, those classes will be gone, which means their API will be gone, which means the test will be gone as well, except for the higher level API of the one that live controller calls. And then there are people who would say integration testing is slow, and then there's hate. You shouldn't be introducing integration tests in our design, in our test suite, because it's slow. You have a principle of not having integration tests. And then I sometimes try to answer this question with those 3 questions, and it comes from the same book. I'm sorry, I have forgotten to mention that: unit testing principle and practices. Okay, I have refactored that picture a little bit, but the main message remained the same. If I think of a perfect test, a test which is giving me everything, I would ask can I refactor the code under test? Does it give me protection? Is it fast? It would be great if I have 3 answers, yes. But I cannot have 3 of those at the same time maximized. I think we should be, and we are always somewhere in the middle of this triangle. For instance, if we are here, meaning I have huge protection because my integration test goes over 5 or 6 units. I can refactor even 6 units and replace them with 1. So I have huge possibility to refactor and gives me huge protection because my test is catching, I'm doing right the air quotes, is catching many different units, but it's not that fast. I can have unit test, which is faster. I can refactor, but only on the unit level. Does it give me protection? Yes, but less protection than the integration test. Why? Because, well, it protects the unit, not set of units connected with each other. By the way, what's here? I have no idea. Here, I mean super fast and gives me huge protection, but no possibility to refactor at all. So in other words, I'm on the lower side of this triangle. What does it mean? I think those will be tests which are checking line by line with some sort of mocking tooling if a certain class was called in a certain way. So I cannot change the algorithm at all. Does it give me protection? Yes. I cannot change anything. Is it fast? Yes. Can I refactor? Nope, because the tests are actually mimicking the implementation details. So I cannot change anything. Well, I think there are better ways of saying, hey, you cannot change that code. Like I can forbid people from, I can deny people from pushing to main branch, for instance. That's the same, right? You cannot change anything in here. But long story short, we can actually use integration tests, end-to-end tests. They all have place, even though some of them will be faster. They will give me more protection. So actually, we can have a common understanding. I'm going to wrap up. Sorry for using I was going to say months, not minutes, more than I was supposed to use. This was unit testing done right. I have no idea if we have time for questions right now, but I will be on Slack. So I will leave, I won't leave the Slack channel. I will be there. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them right now, maybe on Slack, whatever is your preference. And if you have questions, but they come to your mind tomorrow or in 1 week or in 1 month, this is my Twitter handle here, and that's the best way to reach me. Thanks for having me. I wish it had been on site. I love Riga. I love Devternity, and I'm very happy that I was invited here and I had possibility to share those thoughts. Thank you.